of fact, it's funny, I'm on the student study team with Mr. McFarland and Mrs. Hayes, so we meet with anybody who has any kind of concerns. And especially for children who have trouble focusing, one of the things Mr. McFarland does is he brings out his big
he's such an amazing resource.
Yes.
So amazing, yeah.
And it's got everything in it. And one time, this was years ago, he brought out solder wire, you know, that you can buy and bend and stuff. And I took it, and for the rest of the day in meetings, I was moving that thing around. I now have it on my desk at home, too, because sometimes we have to be moving things. You look at one of our staff meetings, and all educators, and some will be hot. One is a couple are great doodlers, they're drawing, but you're really listening and processing, but your hands need to be busy. And what Mr. McFarland says is we have the conscious part of us, and then we have the subconscious. We got to keep the subconscious engaged in something so that it doesn't distract the conscious from learning. So if the subconscious is bouncing on a ball, you know, because sometimes we talk about the therapy balls.
And all the numbers while you're bouncing on a ball, and he would
that keeps that
I'm like, that's so distracting to me.
But that keeps the subconscious focused on something, so the conscious can do that. So, yeah, so I absolutely, movement's very important. This one I hadn't thought of either, but in a homeschool, I think this is very important. Warn students about upcoming transitions. Think of that 2-minute warning with football games. And use that in the classroom. And I do that with my K1s all the time, especially little people, but I think all of them. They want to know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. So if you, especially for the older ones, I love the idea of a visual organizer that they can see every day, that they participate in creating. They can tell what things are going to happen and when they're going to happen. You want to move them around day to day, that's fine, but let them see it and know it. It helps them organize, and it helps them to know what's coming up and that kind of thing. So
that 2-minute warning helps too when the child's so focused on what they're doing, because I have one or two that can't break easily. So if I tell them in 2 minutes we're going to be doing this next thing, it gives them a heads up of, okay, I have to finish what I'm doing. Did you understand? We're going to move on? Yes, Mom. Okay, great. And then I don't get the, okay, it's time to go. And then they're like, freaking out, like, wait, I can't, I have to finish coloring, or I have to finish this problem, or whatnot. That helps a lot.
I think it's really helpful to always be thinking when we're teaching of how we would be in that situation, you know. So it's funny, I was teaching money with the kindergarten and first graders, and what I recalled was when I was in Costa Rica, and I was trying to figure out how to pay for things, and I had these unfamiliar coins with me, and I really was just like, here, take them and whatever. So when I went to teach coins, I tried to think, what was most important to me with the Costa Rican coins? Oh, well, here was the lady with the crown, so I know that one was this. So we looked at coins, and we were like, what do you see? What's that guy look like? How's he different from what this guy looks like? You know, so we talked about the characteristics of the coins, because that's what I would have used, or I did use when I was trying to memorize the values of the coins. So it's great for you to think about, how would I learn, you know, what strategies would I use, and then put those in there as well. The next one is the pace of your speech. This is just a little hint. It says the more complex or unfamiliar, you're slower, you need to pace it. So that's just a little hint there. And also, I highlighted under pace of a lesson, provide a variety of learning experiences, built-in movement and processing time. Pretty much that sums up good teaching right there in that sentence. You're providing a variety and different, diverse learning experiences. If you're letting them move and you're giving them time to think, you're doing a great job. So that, I really, really liked this. So the next thing I wanted you to get out is SQ3R. And that should be right by there. These are literacy strategies across the curriculum. So you use these in science, you use them in social studies, and definitely in any kind of literature. You use them with 5-year-olds and you use them with 15-year-olds. So I really liked this, and I put a big star by survey because sometimes we forget about this part, and I thought it was one of the most important things. Anytime a student is going to be attacking some new information, for example, the age of Confucius, the first thing they need to do, whether they're on the grid or you're using a different book, whatever you want to do, is they need to read the title, The Age of Confucius. Then, if there is an introduction or summary, do it. I would have them look over here at these things. I used to teach struggling readers. I was the Title I teacher for 3 years. And one of my favorite things to do, because my job was to bring them up to grade level, and they were at least a year below grade level. And their comprehension was really low. And so one of my favorite things to do was and they hated reading, tell them, okay, we're not even going to read. It's right, you're not allowed to read any words. Do not let me see you read. And they loved that. So we would read the title. We would read anything on the sides. The next thing says headings and subheadings, rulers and their subjects, ideas about government. Look at charts and pictures. We would talk about the pictures. Say, I don't want to see you in there reading any of these words yet. Because the traditional way some people teach is, okay, you're supposed to read pages 270 and 275, do that, and then answer the questions at the end. And they're like, I don't want to read that. So this is great, because I'm saying, do not read this. And then, so we get to all this, opponents of Confucianism. And then we've got our review questions. Notice any points that are emphasized, the large fonts, the italicized. Read the questions at the end. This is where those sticky notes come in so great. So they read, how did the teachings of Confucius compare with those of the moist? That's the legalists and the Taoists. And I do that when I read with my students too. I'll say, ooh, that's a strange word. What do you think that means? I have no clue. I've never even heard that word. Start making those connections with them. So now they get their sticky note, and when they do start to read this with you, if they find the answer about the comparisons of or any kind of hints, boom, number 1 sticky note goes in there. You can do this with kindergartners too, with the questions. Start modeling it now. If you're reading a book on the 5 little ducks, and so the question is, what do you think the ducks are going to do? They can put a sticky note in there if you want, that kind of a thing. So this is the way all information should be started, I think, across the subject areas. It directs them, it gets them focused, it gets them thinking, and then what we want to do is have them start to make some connections. Start to ask questions. What are we going to find out? Okay, we heard things like ideas about government, opponents of Confucius, a follower of him. What do you think this is going to be about, this chapter? I tell all my family you should have a notebook for every subject area, just a little spiral bound one. So in their social studies book, they would put up lesson 2, chapter 9. This is going to be about a person named Confucius. So far it sounds like he's in charge because he's got subjects, but it sounds like some people like him and some people don't. Let them start to think about it and summarize it. Now they're investing themselves in what they're going to be reading. They're making that investment. So that's very helpful. Then when they go into it, they can say, oh, he was in charge of people, Then they start to validate what they were saying. So we've got the questions then, and the main point, evidence. This is for older kids, obviously, but we can do this in a talk about with little ones. And then where it says make notes in the margins, it'll say see these pages on highlighting. I just say use sticky notes. And then they recite, and then they review, and again, they can use that. So this is the way for us now as we're starting into the second half of our school year, our second semester, to start to reflect on our teaching practice. Am I doing this with the lessons that I teach my children across the boards? Am I making sure that they have time to interact with text, to come up with the answers? Well, even if they're in kindergarten, are we talking about the things? Are we making connections with it first? And then are we going to look back and then see where we right, where we wrong?
I mainly ask him who, what, where, when, why.
Good.
That's the main things I'm really focusing on right now.
And the next thing I would add is how do you feel about it? Make that personal connection for them. How would you do that? What would you change? Who would you be in the story? Because that's one of the great strategies. Higher order thinking skills it's called connecting. There's connecting. There's questioning. What questions would you want to ask that person? What kind of questions do you have about the story? And then there's, and then it goes on from there. But I really like those.
What would be fun too is to ask him, how would you write it differently? Would you change the ending? And then they're thinking about writing They can't really write yet, but
Exactly.
they're getting there, you know.
And that's the thing is, you know, we need to, we're building these learners, and we're starting formally in kindergarten. We started when they were born, but we're starting formally. And so everything you do has to be with, what do I want them to be at 3rd grade? What do I want them to be at 6th grade? How do I want them to handle themselves in middle school and high school? So I think of that all the time when I'm working with the kindergarten and 1st graders.
I'm thinking about going to college. He's going to go to college? He's absolutely there's
Always,
no
always,
question.
always. Yeah, that's just what's going to happen. So, okay, so that's that neat kind of SQR, just for you to help think about things. This one, the math self-assessment, we're focusing on math, as Mrs. Downs was talking about. I think this would be great for you as a mid-year thing to give to your children. If they're not, you know, if they're kindergartners, you obviously can change some things around. You can add in patterns or whatever, and you can do it together as a group. And like in your family, I would have everybody sit down and fill it out individually and then talk about it and find out. And of course, you can do it in anything, but since we're focusing on math, I really like this idea of finding out how they feel about it and how do you feel about it. One of the things we've talked about on our staff over and over is that some of us feel comfortable teaching higher math, like Mrs. McKendrick is great, and some of us, like myself, this is why I've always taught kindergarten and 1st grade, is I'm very intimidated by the idea of algebra and on up. So for me, I know if I was filling out this, you know, how would I be? So I say fill out one of these yourself, and you can also tailor it to whatever grade level you have. How do you feel about teaching addition with regrouping? How do you feel about teaching algebra and that kind of thing? Because we need to be self-reflective of ourselves as teachers and how we feel about the subject and how we differ from our child. Because so often we want our strengths to be their strengths, and that's not it. So too much so. Okay, the next one I wanted to show you was here, the word study web. And I'm going to actually have you fill this out briefly too, and then again, as I said, if you want a blank copy, I can get you. I'm going to have blank packets for two. This is for them anytime, and what they can do, and you can change these bubbles. This is just an idea. But what I'd like you to put down here is homeschool educator, you as a teacher. Put that in the middle, and then think about that. And of course, what does it mean? What's the formal meaning of it, the dictionary meaning? What's another name for a homeschool educator? What's the opposite of a homeschool educator? Gives us a chance to kind of think about ourselves and the role that we play every single day. So go ahead and take a moment to fill that out.